One of history's most famous mummies is unknown man-E, found at the ancient Egyptian site of Deir el-Bahri.
But this, one of the most scary mummies ever found, is better known to the world as the Screaming Mummy.
This bizarre mummy features a thrown-back head and an open jaw in what looks like a blood-curdling scream. But what happened to Egypt's screaming mummy, and why is he yelling?
Archaeologists analyzed the mummy and his wrappings and have reasoned he might have been a disgraced prince named Pentawere.
Here are 11 interesting facts about the screaming mummy. 1. His hands and feet are bound and he wasn't properly mummified.
The Screaming Mummy was notably different from others mummies Egyptologists have found previously, which raised red flags for scientists.
One notable difference was that rather than linen, he was wrapped in sheepskin, which the purity-obsessed Egyptians regarded as unclean. Only offenders or people damned for eternity would have been entombed in such a manner.
Also, his coffin was unmarked, no one could recite his name in the afterlife, which was a big deal, and his hands and feet were bound, as if he had perished a prisoner.
He wasn't even truly mummified properly, just dried out in natron with resin placed in his mouth.
2. He may have been a prince executed for involvement in the harem conspiracy. Scholars think they might have identified unknown man-E. There was once a man named Prince Pentawere, a son of Pharaoh Ramesses III, who participated in a conspiracy to remove his father from the throne.
One of Ramesses's minor wives, a member of his harem named Deir, wanted her husband off the throne.
She aimed to oust the king and put her son, Pentawere, in his place.
The plan also involved removing Ramesses's chosen heir.
Pentaware's plan didn't make it and he was labeled a traitor, disgraced like man-E, who fit the physical profile of the prince. Interestingly, the Screaming Mummy has similar DNA markers and Y chromosomes to Ramesses III. It's likely that man-E and Ramesses III were father and son.
3. The harem conspiracy involved more than just Prince Pentawere and his mother.
Along with Queen Deir and Prince Pentawere, a group of important noblemen conspired to get rid of Ramesses III. A record of their trial, called the Turin Judicial Papyrus, still survives.
As a result, we know the names of the chief conspirators.
1 was Pentawere, formerly chief of the chamber who stirred up resentment against the pharaoh. Pentawere conspired with ex-butler Mesechur, ex-overseer of the royal harem Penach, and the scribe Penjua.
The conspiracy went all the way to the top. Top-level conspirators included Pies, the former commander of the army, Wanne, the chief of police, Hori, the head of the infantry bearers, and more. As it turns out, the conspirators didn't entirely fail. Examination of the mummy of Ramesses III revealed a 7-centimeter-wide slash on his throat that went deep to the bone. 4. Prince Pentawere took his own life after being condemned by a court. The Turin Judicial Papyrus also records the fate of Pentawere, the would-be pharaoh. Apprehended for colluding with his mother, he was placed before the butlers. In order to examine him, they found him guilty, they left him in his place, he took his own life. But by what means? How exactly did unknown man-E expire? Perhaps by poison.
In 1886, Gaston Maspero, the head of the Egyptian Antiquities Service, hypothesized. All those who saw him firsthand thought that he looked as though he had been poisoned. The contraction of the abdomen and stomach, the desperate movement with which the head is thrown back, the expression of excruciating pain spread over the face hardly allow for any other explanation. A chemist who analyzed the body also suggested the man was perhaps entombed alive or hung, which would back up the suggestion that Pentawere took his own life. 5. The scream only resulted from the head falling back post-mortem. At first glance, one might think that the screaming expression exhibited by the Screaming Mummy came from him experiencing an agonizing pain.
In actuality, it probably happened rather naturally.
As it turns out, his head fell back after he passed. His jaw fell open post-mortem, leaving him screaming for all eternity. 6. The mummy was found among a number of royal coffins. The Screaming Mummy was discovered along with a group of other royal coffins. The group resided at Deir el-Bahri, located near the Valley of the Kings. Lots of the other mummies had identification on them, but not unknown man-e, yet the fact he was included among royal mummies suggests he was of royal blood. 7. Screaming mummies have been found all over the world. The screaming part of the mummy's expression wasn't due to the manner of his demise, but the position of the remains. In fact, screaming mummies can be found all over the world, from Sicily to Peru. One museum in Mexico even boasts over 111 artifacts. Other Egyptian mummies also share the same expression on their faces. As the joints holding the jaw in place slacken, their jaws gape open as rigor mortis sets in, leaving behind a horrific expression. 8. Some scholars speculate he was a Hittite prince. There's no way of making a 100% identification of unknown man-e with Pentawere. But if he wasn't an Egyptian prince, then, who might he have been? There is a theory that perhaps the mummy was once a Hittite prince who was traveling to Egypt to marry King Tut's widow. The prince expired under mysterious conditions and scholars are unaware of his whereabouts. However, scholars have debunked this theory, based on the fact that a man who mysteriously disappeared wouldn't get mummified. Another theory suggests he was an important Egyptian person who perished abroad and only got partially mummified because those around him didn't have access to proper techniques. 9. A famous archaeologist discovered him in 1886, but he only got popular recently. Famous Egyptologist Gaston Maspero discovered the screaming mummy in a royal tomb in 1886, but it was only in recent years that unknown man-e became a tourist attraction. The possibly grim nature of his demise and the expression on his face draw in audiences with a morbid curiosity. Scholars have puzzled over the way he passed for years, but recent display in a museum have the figure national attention. 10. The screaming mummy brought in over 20,000 visitors to the Egyptian Museum. Once the screaming mummy made its debut at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, it proved a popular attraction. The museum director noted that the mummy, once abandoned in the basement, brought in over 20,000 visitors to the museum. These guests were both Egyptian and foreign visitors. It also received international press coverage, drawing attention from around the world. 11. During the Egyptian uprising in 2011, he was one of the few mummies protesters left alone. When the Egyptian Revolution of 2011 rocked the northeastern African nation, much of its cultural heritage came under fire. In particular, the Egyptian Museum in Cairo suffered a number of losses. Dr. Zahi Hawass reported that many priceless artifacts disappeared and 2 mummies were wrecked. However, looters left the screaming mummy alone.